I've never been part of negotiations as serious as these. There are more Republicans at the table talking about changing our gun laws and investing in mental health than at any time since Sandy Hook.
There are intensive discussions underway. It includes people who have not been engaged on this issue in the past. I certainly can't guarantee any outcome, but it feels to me like we are closer than we've been since I've been in the Senate.
So you can get 4 other Republicans to stand with you, the 6 who are negotiating?
My hope is we'll get a lot more than that. My hope is we'll get at least half the Republican conference. That should be the goal here.
That should be the goal here. There's Senator Pat Toomey, also Chris Murphy. Yes, that's a Republican and a Democrat, both talking about how optimistic they are about the potential to actually pass some kind of gun legislation. So what I need now is some specifics. Pat Toomey, give me some. What are you guys talking about?
Is your proposal to expand background checks still in it?
Well, I certainly hope we're going to have an expansion of background checks. You know, Senator Manchin and I have been working on this for a long time, and we've tried to establish that at least for commercial sales of firearms, there ought to be a background check. So sales at gun shows, sales that are advertised over the internet. We all agree that violent criminals and deranged, dangerously mentally ill people shouldn't have firearms. So we need a mechanism to increase the likelihood that we'll identify such a person and prevent them from buying a gun legally anyway. I think there is a place to land that's consistent with the Second Amendment, as I've been advocating for expanding background checks. By the way, I think encouraging states to have some kind of red flag laws could make sense as long as there's adequate due process. I think there are school safety provisions. There are mental health issues that we could address. So there are things we could do that would be constructive, that are consistent with Republican values, and I'm hoping we'll get there.
So there's some details in there, a few, as you may probably see when it comes to bipartisan negotiations, when it comes to things where both sides want something different. But you have to ask yourself, what is it Republicans want? So in there, they threw about school security initiatives or things of that nature, which I assume is some of these things they're talking about with fortifying schools. We'll find out, because it's a very generic term that they're using as far as those things. But he did say background check expansion. Also, dangerous people shouldn't have firearms. Sounds like red flag laws there. Now, again, I got Senator Toomey saying it. Chris Murphy's also optimistic. Again, the Democrat, except check out the tone, because this is where I start to get a little bit more pessimistic, because he's already trying to give away the positions that he's advocating for, but they're similar. Watch.
Now, I've also been part of many failed negotiations in the past, so I'm sober-minded about our chances. We're talking about a meaningful change in our gun laws, a major investment in mental health, perhaps some money for school security that would make a difference. On the table is red flag laws, changes to our background check system to improve the existing system, a handful of other items that will make a difference. Can we get there by the end of next week, as Senator Schumer has requested? I don't know. As late as last night, we were engaged in conversations about trying to put a package together, because I think Republicans realize how scared parents and kids are across this country. I think they realize that the answer to this kind cannot be nothing.
I feel like his points were couched in worrying about making sure that people know. I think Republicans are actually serious this time. You know, they realize that parents are scared. No, let's just talk about what's happening. We've been taking so long to get to this point because Republicans haven't cared. Now, if Republicans now are caring, now it's because of the pressure that's being put on them by actual American citizens that they're willing to listen to, the few that are talking here. But there's still a Republican that's talking about how they're not ready. They're not that scared. I'm gonna give you a second to jump in here, Jessica, but let's go through what John Cornyn said, who again was hand selected by Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, to be a part of this negotiation process, and also a senator from Texas, the state where Uvalde shooting happening. So let's look at this tweet. He's responding to Joe Pagliaro, I believe he's a talk show host. He said, I'm told Cornyn is making gun laws more restrictive. I get emails to have the senator back on and to go at him on this. John is from Texas. I've interviewed him over hundreds of times. Until I hear him say he wants to restrict my Second Amendment rights, I'll refrain from judging, which John Cornyn responded to that tweet saying not gonna happen, which I think we can assume he's saying he's not gonna look to make gun laws more restrictive. Before we go to the response to that, I want your first few thoughts on this, Jessica, because I feel like I've held you back. What's going on?
I feel like it's interesting to think about who's involved in these negotiations. So with the Dems, we've got Blumenthal, we've got Murphy, both from Connecticut, right? The state where Sandy Hook happened. They've always been pretty vocally, advocates for gun control. And then the Republican side, we've got Toomey, Cassidy, Collins, Graham, and then Manchin and Sinema as well. But I think it's actually good that they're involved with these negotiations, just because we won't see them pull out support last minute. And I think expanding background checks and closing loopholes is good. And yeah, I think we need to see Chris Murphy actually speak from a place of confidence. We've been talking about, manifesting this morning, manifesting that Monday's the best day of the week. I think Chris Murphy needs a lesson on manifesting and speaking things into existence. He should be saying, we're confident we absolutely can close background check loopholes, because we still have people purchasing firearms with no background checks from people who don't have federal licenses at gun shows and trades. We've got to close that loophole. We also have the 3-day loophole, where if the background check isn't completed in 3 days, you can purchase the firearm with no background check. And so, we can also expand mental health care data considered in these background checks. And Chris Murphy should be talking about all of this and say how insane it would be if we didn't have at least 60 senators in support of this, when 78% of Americans support background checks, but they're not speaking from a place of confidence. And that's a big problem, because it's not going to get done if you start the negotiations from a point of weakness.
Yeah, so speaking of that, I'm glad you said it that way, because it goes straight into what then Chris Murphy was saying in response, because he was asked by Jake Tapper, as far as that tweet I just read about John Cornyn, saying not gonna happen. Is there gonna be some pushback? Let's watch.
Just a few days ago, I have to say, Senator Cornyn tweeted that Second Amendment restrictions are, quote, not gonna happen, he said. So what does that mean, not gonna happen? Does that mean none of the things you're negotiating are gonna happen?
Well, I guess I also agree that we're not gonna do anything that compromises people's Second Amendment rights. We're not gonna do anything that compromises the ability of a law-abiding American to be able to buy a weapon. I think there's agreement amongst the negotiators that we're gonna take some common sense steps that do not compromise Second Amendment rights. We're likely gonna pair it with some significant mental health spending, which will make a difference as well. And I think everything Senator Cornyn has said is consistent with the negotiations we're having. Listen, we're not gonna do everything I want. We are not going to put a piece of legislation on the table that's gonna ban assault weapons, or we're not gonna pass comprehensive background checks. But right now, people in this country want us to make progress.
Senator Murphy alluded to the idea that it's not gonna be everything, certainly, that Democrats would like. We'll see where it ends up.
I added that Pat Toomey part there at the end because it's exactly the way these things work. John Cornyn says some boisterous things on Twitter. Not gonna happen, absolutely not. Can't believe you guys would even think and suggest such a thing. Chris Murphy says, that's consistent, yeah, that's right. No, it's very consistent what we've been talking about. We're not gonna do anything, that's right, you're true, he's right, yeah, it's true. No, instead of talking about why this guy has this attitude, why are you so angry when we just saw 19 children get murdered? Call them out. But again, it sets it up for then Pat Toomey, who's the other nice guy on the Republican side in these negotiations, to say, even Chris Murphy said they're not gonna do anything, so why should we do anything? By the way, last thing before we jump out of this story, because we've taken plenty on it, Jerry Nadler did point out, because he's talked to some of these Republicans, these conscious Republicans. I think Joe Biden was even talking about some good Republicans that are ready to do something. Jerry Nadler has been talking to them, and he has a different perspective.
So have you talked to Republicans? Have you gotten a sense of what can be compromised on? It just seems like.
I've talked to Republicans in our committee, and they're not prepared to compromise on anything. Not even the most simple things.
We'll see where that goes.